Hello, and today what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be walking you through kind of the basics and anything you would need to know about using Quizlet in your classroom. So first thing you're going to need to do is just sign up for an account. If you already have a Google account or a Facebook, something you'd like to link it to, then it's very easy. You just click create an account using Gmail, and then it'll just kind of sync all of your data with it. After you've done that, you would need to create a vocabulary set. I already have a couple here on the screen because I've been using Quizlet in my classroom for about 3 or 4 years. If you don't want to make a set, there's a good chance that if you search for what you're specifically trying to teach your class, you would more than likely be able to find it, as there's hundreds of thousands of sets out there, and I would strongly recommend searching for content before you go to create your own content, because as teachers, we don't have always enough time to go and create new stuff. So it's always great to try and take stuff that other people have already created for us. Quizlet, there's also a app version of it. It's kind of a watered down version of what the website provides. As a teacher, it's not really good. For the students, it's okay. It lacks a couple of the features that they would have on the website. So if they're using an iPad in their classroom, it would be better for them to go through the web browser and use Quizlet on the website as opposed to using Quizlet, the app. That would just be my personal recommendation. The primary purpose of using Quizlet in your classroom is to help students learn vocabulary. I teach 8th grade social studies, South Carolina history, and because I teach social studies, it is very, very much reliant on vocabulary in my class. Each indicator I go through in the year has anywhere between 5 to 30 vocabulary words that the students would need to learn and master in just about a couple days or a week. So it's really important that I spend time, quality time, on the students mastering vocabulary. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of take you into one of my sets so that you can kind of see how it's constructed, how the students exactly study the set, and then how me as a teacher, like how I assign it and what my expectations are in my classroom with it. I'm going to take you into 8-1.1, which in my class is basically the Eastern Woodland Native Americans. So when you get here, at the top, it'll show you what set you're in. So for me, that's 811. Just below that, it lets the teacher know what classes it's assigned to. In case you teach different levels of classes, you can kind of make sure that you're assigning sets to the appropriate classes. Underneath that's just a quick tool guide. So the far left is a pencil you could edit. The arrow next to it you could share. The plus button would allow you to add it to different classes, or if you want to organize your sets into folders, you could do that. Info is just whatever generic info you created when you entered the set. Just any, it's more of like a housekeeping thing. I usually don't really enter too much in there. Progress, I'm going to talk about in just a little bit. And then this last one allows you to print the whole vocabulary list, maybe export it. And something that I use quite frequently is combine. What I try to do is I combine my indicators, so like 811, 812, 813. And then when I'm going to give a standard assessment on all of 8-1, I try to combine my sets to one larger set so that the students can still kind of review some vocabulary that they might not have seen in a couple of weeks. As you scroll down, you'll see that I have 10 vocabulary words in this set. The vocabulary words are here in this left column. Definitions are in the middle column. I have pictures in the right column. You could sort the set alphabetically, how you originally created it, or by the student progress. So like if you wanted to kind of see how your students were doing, you could see basically with that. So UMassy is a word that students are getting correct 86% of the time as they're going through my activities. which would tell you that that is a strong word, whereas if you were to scroll to the throughout the list, you can kind of see where they're doing with the words. Some words usually come a little easier, some words usually come a little more difficult for the students. My OCD, I typically just sort it out alphabetically. There is an option here for the Quizlet to actually say the word in the definition. And when you as the teacher actually edit this set, there's actually an option in there for you to do the voiceover. So you can have your students actually hear you pronounce the word, or you actually read the definition, so they're not just hearing a generic computerized voice. Now, on the teacher screen, you have 8 options for the students to either study or practice vocabulary. Students, on the other hand, only have 7 options. The 7 options the students get are learn, which is the far left, flashcards, write, spell, test, match, and gravity. The teachers get an option to do live, which is something that they would do as an entire class. Learn, to basically summarize that, is it is a smart, customizable, and adaptive learning experience. That's actually what it says on the Quizlet website, and that is by far the best definition and description that I could come up with for learn. Flashcards is a digital version of the traditional index card flashcard, where you'd have a word on one side and a definition or a picture on the other. There is an option for students to just kind of like go through it on their own. They could go through it at their own pace. They could just hit play and let it kind of shuffle through all the words for them. It's totally up to how the students want to practice it. Right. Basically what you get is you get the picture and the definition, and then the students have to write into the word. It does show remaining, incorrect, correct. It's not very difficult for students to go through it a couple times and then eventually end up getting all of the words correct. Spell, what it does is it basically just says here. So if you come to here, you just click the speaker button, and then it will say the word, or it'll say the word. It'll show the students the definition and the picture kind of as a backup, and then they just kind of type what they hear. So it's very similar to write in the fact that they're typing in the term, but they're hearing how it's pronounced and they're matching it up with the definition, which is very helpful. After spell, the students have an option for a test. Test is something that I like because the students can customize it to what they want: written, matching, multiple choice, true or false. Typically what I try to do is I ask my students to just do multiple choice, mostly because they already have an option for written, they have a matching option for matching on Quizlet. So by doing written and matching again, that's kind of redundant. True or false, I don't like to do too much because it's kind of tricky for students if they're not careful. And then the last thing is that they can answer with either the term or the definition. So if they want to answer with the term, it will give them a definition, and then it will give them 4 answer options with the correct term. If they want to answer with the definition, it would give them a term, and then they would have to click what definition properly matches that term. After test, you have match, which is exactly what it sounds. They have to match the term with a definition and or picture. And then gravity will be our final option, which is a game. Basically, it is what it says on the screen, in that you're protecting planets from incoming asteroids. When you do that, you set up the game, whether you want it to be with all the vocabulary words, how difficult you want it to be, which is basically how fast it's going to move, and then what you're going to answer with. If you choose to answer with the definition, it's going to be very difficult. But if you want to answer with the term, it will make it a whole lot easier. This is something that can get super competitive in your class, but it's a great way for students to practice vocabulary. The only other option that the students do not get, but the teacher gets, is live. Live is a feature that you would use as an entire class. How I like to use it some days is my exit slip for the day. Like if I've taught quite a few new vocabulary words, or I just want to kind of see how the class as a whole is doing with their vocabulary acquisition. Live is a great way to test that at once. When you click that, it'll ask the teacher how you want to set it up, whether you want to have a game with the definition first and then the term, or would you want to have the term and then the definition? Once you've clicked the game, it gives you a game pin. Students enter the game. It sorts them out into teams. 3 to 4 students. Each student will get then a list of like 4 vocabulary words that they're responsible for. As a team, then they need to make sure they go through without getting one wrong. If they get one wrong, it then resets, and then they have to do it again. The team that gets all of them right in a row, the fastest, then ends up being the winner. Some teachers, what they do is then they'll move kids so that they're all sitting as a team. What I like to do is we play silent Quizlet live in my classroom so that the kids are sitting nowhere near their teammates unless they just randomly ended up on the team with them. And then it makes it a little bit more challenging because then the students are truly responsible for knowing the vocabulary words on their own. So teachers can integrate this into their teaching practices, I think, in 3 main areas. The first one is vocabulary acquisition, the second being vocabulary practice, and then the third being materials made. Vocabulary acquisition would be whenever you're starting a new unit, a new section in your class, and you want to introduce the students to new vocabulary. An example of how I use this is whenever I'm giving a pre-assessment for what I'm about to teach, on that day in class, as students begin to finish the pre-assessment, I will guide them to the next Quizlet section so that they could just get started before I'm even teaching any of this stuff, so that the next couple of days as I start teaching this, they will already be familiar with some of the vocabulary. Then once you're into the unit, it's important to go back and continue having students practice on Quizlet. So as they're seeing the words in class, as they're hearing you as the teacher say the words, and put them into context, that way they actually know what you're talking about. And there's no such thing as too much practice. The last thing would be materials being made. So a few things that I've touched on, such as flashcards and tests, could be very beneficial to the teacher. The teachers can actually go into like the flashcard section and print out flashcards that they could then cut out and put on the old traditional index cards for students to study. This could be great if you wanted to integrate a Kagan strategy such as quiz trade, because then all it requires you to do is just print, cut, and glue. You're not writing out words, you're not writing out definitions, and it takes a fraction of the time. Additionally, printing a vocabulary test on the fly is very easy. It's random, so if you want to create a version A, a version B, a version C, you can just continue to click randomize. That way you can have 3-4 different versions in your classroom without having to worry about actually going and creating them on your own. In addition, you could just simply print out the list of words and definitions, and then you could give them to students and have them create their own index cards or other study tools that they would like to use. In my classroom, what I tell the students, my expectation is if they ever find themselves with downtime or free time, or if they just have finished work before we move on to the next section, the expectation is that they're supposed to go to Quizlet to practice their vocabulary. As I said earlier, in my impression, there's no such thing as too much practice. Overall, I would say that this is an extremely useful tool. For a teacher, if you decide to pay for the paid account, you get one feature that is super helpful, which is a class progress screen. So for me, I assign my students to do any 5 of the 7 activities they can do. So remember, they have learn, flashcards, write, spell, test, match, and gravity. Those are 7. My students only have to do any 5. 5 times 20 is 100, so that's kind of why I grade 5 as opposed to 7, because it just kind of naturally goes into there. Additionally, that allows student choice. So if a student really doesn't like doing matching, they don't have to do matching. They can go an entire year in my class without ever having to do the matching activity. And I'll quickly show you kind of how I grade that. So when you go to the class progress screen, it'll look something like this. A green check mark means that the students have done it. They have fully completed the assignment, and that is what I grade them on. So each green check mark is roughly 20 percentage points. They get 5. That adds up to a 100. If an activity is just darkened, like the gravity is right here, that means that the student started it and didn't finish. In this student's case, I can attest that it was because class was ending when she started gravity, and she just kind of closed her Chromebook, and that's where she left off at it. In the event that like a student doesn't already have 5 done, usually I give them half credit for starting something but not finishing it, so that would end up being 10 percentage points for an activity. Like I said, since I teach social studies, I go through indicators very quickly, usually between 3 days and like 5 days is how long it takes me to get through each indicator. So every 3 to 5 days, my students are getting an entire new Quizlet set. So that means that they are completing 5 activities every 3 to 5 days in my class for a grade. These activities are not super time consuming. Out of all of them, gravity and learn probably take the most time to do, because learn is adaptive. So if students start to struggle a little bit more, it's going to take them a little bit longer to get through. But students can actually make up time, as flashcards and match are typically ones that they can do within a matter of seconds to a minute. That's why I kind of allow the students to have choice on what they want to do. And that is it. That is my explanation of Quizlet. That is how I use it in class. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. My email is mdougan@oregoncountyschools.net. Thank you for listening.